I'm feeling trapped, unable to break free. They continue to hold CC back. Kennedy Carter, you claimed Becky Hammond has. You restrained. It's like they have actual manacles on you. Liberate Caitlin Clark. I had premonition that after that legendary 4.5.10 assist record-shattering display, a feat never before seen in the history of the sport, there would be issues. The point is straightforward. Free Caitlin Clark. And it isn't because Indiana lost. They won by 20 points. Nor is it because she delivered a flawless performance, because she clearly didn't. Yet, immediately after her explosive record-setting night, the subsequent match devolved into yet another squabble regarding why their most dangerous offensive threat was relegated to the bench, sitting there and watching. Caitlin Clark only saw 26 minutes of action. They are still insisting on a minute's restriction. They are resentful that she obliterated that record. They went ahead and ignited all sorts of fresh racial controversies. Sandy Brondello was forced into the role of a scapegoat for a baseless racial inquiry, all because Caitlin Clark reached a new milestone. What unfolded today? They kept her benched as a form of punishment. They shut her out. Stephanie White froze Caitlin Clark out of this matchup. Regardless, the Indiana Fever still managed to secure a win by a significant margin. This is where the narrative turns uncomfortable, as a 108-88 victory should be cut and dry. The Fever took down the Liberty. Indiana is now 16-10. Kelsey Mitchell went off. The bench contributed heavily. The second half defensive intensity completely shifted the momentum. But the post-game discourse wasn't focused on the score because Caitlin Clark was only on the court for 26 minutes. The way those minutes were handled is what sparked the real outrage. She wasn't simply resting for routine intervals. The grievance here is that she was repeatedly pulled toward the end of periods, precisely when star players typically dictate the closing plays, control the tempo, earn trips to the stripe, or maintain their flow. And that is the cycle this video aims to address. Was Stephanie White simply being cautious with a player recovering from a lingering issue and tight back-to-back scheduling? Or did the Fever once again force Caitlin Clark into a tactical structure that stifles the very qualities that make her elite? Hang on, because later on there's a specific nuance regarding their offensive scheme that explains why this game proved to be so much more difficult than required. Anyway, the final score was 108-88. Look, I'll start by stating this right away. Caitlin Clark didn't play her best. She finished with 17 points, 7 assists, and 7 turnovers. I'd argue that 3 of those giveaways weren't on her. 3 of them occurred because teammates started a backdoor cut, then decided, actually, never mind, I'm aborting this. Lexi Hull, Sophie Cunningham, I think Kelsey pulled that move too. Seriously, if you commit to the backdoor cut, just follow through. You guys are manufacturing turnovers for her that shouldn't be on her stat sheet. Regardless of the circumstances, Caitlin Clark struggled initially, failing to find her range from beyond the arc. Ultimately, she wrapped up the night hitting 5 of 14 field goals and 2 of 8 trays, offering ammunition for both camps. Her final stat line read 17 points paired with 7 assists and 7 giveaways. Her shooting percentages remained modest. She hovered around those same 5 of 1-4 and 2 of 8 marks, far from the explosive 4.5.10 assist performance fans just witnessed. It certainly wasn't her most polished display, and no objective observer should pretend otherwise, which highlights the importance of the rotation. When a player's jumper isn't falling, establishing momentum is critical. A floor general needs consistency to steady the team's attacking style. As the defense tightens up and officiating becomes erratic, a head coach must decide whether to let their star operator persist or constantly pull her. In Clark's case, those interruptions are never benign. Her entire playstyle thrives on relentless intensity and creating defensive stress. She manipulates the opposition long before the shot is taken, relying on seamless movement, mutual trust, and precise timing. When teammates hesitate or the offensive structure keeps shifting, constant substitutions disrupt her ability to read the defense. If she's yanked off the floor just as she's dissecting the defensive coverage, the high turnover tally fails to capture the full narrative. That isn't to say she was blameless, as she definitely had moments where she clearly forced the issue. She took some hurried shots and made questionable reads, appearing too eager to hunt for the highlight reel pass. Yet, the deeper concern is why she felt so rushed, never really settling into a comfortable groove. I honestly believe Caitlin Clark couldn't establish a flow, and it's clear why. The decision to turn Aaliyah Boston into the primary hub completely derailed their offensive rhythm, frankly speaking. Why is Boston bringing the ball up the court? She's constantly clogging space right where Clark needs to operate at the top. Stephanie White needs to stick to the game plan that worked perfectly fine during yesterday's efficient performance. Now, suddenly, she's the hub, camping out at the key and getting in the way. It disrupts the pick and roll entirely. If they aren't running a screen, park her inside on the block to post up. That's where the real grievance lies. This isn't a critique of Boston's talent. She is undoubtedly an all-star caliber post player with excellent vision for her position. She remains a vital piece of the roster. The real problem is the resulting lack of floor spacing and tactical clarity. When Boston initiates play from the perimeter, Clark stops being the engine that warps the defense and becomes merely a cog in the machine. It might provide a change of pace for a few possessions, giving Indiana an alternative look to keep opponents guessing. It can certainly throw off a defense that's too focused on shadowing their primary superstar, Clark. While she can facilitate Boston's play, relying too heavily on that dynamic often clutters the lane for the Fever. Opponents get a breather when she sits. The defense stops needing to track her every move, and the Fever start, losing sight of their most effective identity. The offense is lethal only when the opposition fears that Caitlin Clark remains a triple threat to shoot, pass, or drive from any spot. This is exactly what supporters notice. It isn't just about branding. Her gravity defines their entire scheme. Whenever Indiana deviates from that, the game becomes unnecessarily difficult. Look, Stephanie White consistently iced Caitlin Clark out. She was being pulled from the action with roughly 3.5 minutes remaining in every single period. It needs to stop. Cut the minutes management, you know. The only reason she checked back in with a minute left in the second frame was because Kelsey Mitchell picked up 3 personal fouls. Otherwise, Clark remained on the sidelines for the final stretch of every quarter. It's impossible for her to find a groove when she's sitting on the bench for such lengthy intervals. This isn't just about her playing 26 minutes total, it's the timing. The real issue is the specific pattern of pulling her with 3:30 left in each period, aside from that one instance where Mitchell's foul trouble forced an adjustment. That is critical because the end of quarter stretch is when star players shine. Those are the crucial moments where elite guards manage the clock, exploit tired defenders, draw contact, or build late momentum. By keeping Clark off the court during those specific windows, Indiana isn't just rationing minutes, they're depriving her of high leverage opportunities. Stephanie White's supporters will argue that Clark was nursing a recent injury or that it was the second game of a back-to-back. They'll point to the 2-0-point victory as proof. The staff handled things correctly. That logic holds up, but the opposing view is just as valid. If she is healthy enough to start, lead the backcourt, and log significant court time, then supporters have every right to ask why her role seems restricted, as if she's still in recovery mode, especially since the athlete herself has expressed a desire for a more consistent rhythm. Seriously, Stephanie White, drop it. The player says she's fine and feels great. Just let her hoop. She simply can't find her flow when she's being sidelined for these massive, extended pauses. I suspect she feels pressured to force plays whenever she is in because she's rushing against the clock. I have to wrap this up quickly before they pull me in 2 minutes. I really need to hustle. It feels like this reveals exactly why her missed attempts were more concerning than the final stats show. Clark wasn't simply struggling, she appeared to be racing against the buzzer. Once a shooter knows her time on court is limited, everything becomes frantic. A routine, early clock three-pointer turns into a shot she feels compelled to force. A standard pass is converted into a delivery. She thinks she must thread through a tight window immediately. A play that should develop over 12 seconds shifts into a desperate search for flow before the substitution buzzer sounds. This doesn't excuse poor choices, but it provides context for the disjointed offense. Ironically, a minute restriction meant to keep a player fresh can trigger the very type of hurried play that diminishes her effectiveness. You intend to protect her physical health, yet you force her into a mindset where every touch of the ball carries desperate weight. That is certainly not how Clark dismantles opponents. She destroys defenses by compounding pressure. One deep triple drags a defender out. A quick lead pass forces wings to sprint. A backdoor cut exposes overcommitment. A pick and roll draws the help side defense inward. By the time the opposition reacts, she has already anticipated their next blunder. But if those sequences are broken repeatedly, the pressure never truly boils over. Honestly, the officiating was abysmal. Caitlin Clark gets shoved. Two-handed shoves on jump shots, no foul called. Multiple times, Caitlin Clark should have walked to the free throw line. Nothing. I wonder if someone, maybe Kathy Engelbert, issued a directive saying, "Look, she set a record that's unprecedented. Don't whistle fouls for her." It was utterly ridiculous. How frequently she was fouled without a single call being made. The officiating aspect is a different issue, and it requires careful handling. The suggestion here is that Clark was pushed during shots, struck on drives, and denied the calls she deserved. That is a subjective assessment based on the footage. It isn't evidence of a league-wide conspiracy, and any implication that someone intentionally stifled calls is merely speculation rather than verified truth. Nevertheless, one doesn't need a theory to understand why fans feel incensed. Clark endures significant physical contact. She gets grabbed off the ball, bumped during movement, and swarmed during jump shots, because defenders prioritize illegal contact over giving her space. When the officiating becomes inconsistent, it alters the trajectory of the entire contest. For a shooter, free throws provide more than just points. They offer rhythm. They are a breather. They help them find their touch. They settle the game down and penalize overly physical defense. So, when Clark is battling through fragmented rotations, a congested offensive plan, constant defensive harassment, and ignored fouls, only makes things worse. It's the reason the narrative repeats itself. If she is the face who drives ticket demands, high ratings, and media focus, why is she often the least protected by the flow of the match? It's absurd. I believe Caitlin Clark was thrown off her game largely because Stephanie White stifled her, curbing her minutes and attempting to force a return to the interior-focused offense now that Aaliyah Boston is active. That's precisely what I feel stalled Caitlin Clark offensively earlier today. Now we must pivot to this. Kelsey Mitchell was incredible in the second half. Another 3-0 point outing for Mitchell. She was truly turning up the heat, cooking up something special. Mitchell shot 1-0 of 1-4 absolute peak efficiency, 10 makes 4 of 6 from deep. She finished with 33 points. Now, let's shift focus, because the Fever didn't survive on luck. They won because Kelsey Mitchell ignited after half-time, producing 33 points on 14 attempts, his high-level production. 4 of 6. Shooting from behind the arc is elite. When Mitchell drives effectively and her jumper lands, she provides Indiana with the vital element every Clark-led roster needs: a secondary scoring threat who penalizes defenses for crowding the star. Yet, this is also where the squad's stylistic conflict surfaces. 63 points across 2 matches with only 1 assist is quite a unique stat line. Mitchell is a pure scorer. Her job isn't playmaking, she isn't looking to set the table. She is programmed to put the ball in the hoop. When the shots go in, that wins games, which it did today. But the risk lies in the fever, mistaking a hot streak for a sustainable system. An individual scoring surge is not equivalent to a team's primary philosophy. Mitchell can be an explosive weapon alongside Clark. But if the offensive scheme shifts heavily toward isolation play, post-centric setups, and stagnant possessions, then Clark's main value becomes diluted. The ideal model is simple. Clark exerts pressure. Boston screens and rolls to punish switches. Mitchell exploits tilted defenses. Cunningham provides spacing. And the bench handles the dirty work. That creates a cohesive rhythm. The chaotic version is what worries fans. Clark losing control of the ball. Boston hovering as a stagnant pivot. Mitchell playing hero ball, and teammates left guessing where their rhythm went. One path makes the fever dangerous. The other makes a double-digit victory fodder for controversy. Closing the final half, I suppose. After an inconsistent, sluggish opening, Aaliyah Boston delivered a much stronger second act. She tallied 15 points, 7 boards, 4 dimes, and 5 giveaways. I'm not sure. Aaliyah Boston had a solid performance overall, bolstered significantly by a superior second half. I wish she would drop. This high-post positioning gimmick, it just clogged things up early on. Meanwhile, the New York Liberty couldn't miss a beat. Marine Johannes drained 4 of 5 from beyond the arc in the first quarter alone, hitting at a 67% clip. Boston's night perfectly highlights why critiques aren't personal. She logged 15 points, 7 boards, and 6 dimes, but also committed 5 giveaways. That stat line is a mixed bag. Those 6 assists validate the coaching staff's confidence in her basketball IQ. Yet those 5 errors underscore the danger of forcing the offense through her in areas where perimeter players should be generating the initial advantage. She shines when keeping things simple, setting hard picks, rolling to the hoop, sealing defenders, and dumping off passes when the double team arrive. Indiana doesn't need her playing point center to thrive. Their offensive logic is straightforward enough. Clark's deep range pulls defenders in every direction, while Boston's physical presence draws them into the paint. Mitchell's scoring punishes defensive shifts, and Cunningham and the reserves exploit overcommitment. That is how spacing works. However, keeping Boston at the top of the key too much can stifle that synergy by letting the defense track, everything happening right in front of them. It pulls Clark away from her strengths, asking a post player to run the offense, rather than letting their elite guard create chaos. That was the core issue. The problem wasn't just the 26 minutes. It was that those 26 minutes occurred within a scheme that failed to leverage her talents during the opening half. It was absurd. Everything changed in the second half, where the Indiana Fever's defensive intensity fueled their comeback and eventual win. Breanna Stewart went 1-0 of 1-6 for 26 points, but besides her, Jonquil Jones tallied 13 but went cold later, and Johannes scored nothing after the opening period. Sabrina Ionescu was practically invisible. Those 12 points and 4 assists were among the quietest I've ever seen. I'm just not sold on Sabrina's game. The Fever clamped down, which completely flipped the script. New York started white-hot, with Johannes nailing 4 triples early. The Liberty were lights out from deep. Before half-time, Stewart was efficient with her 26 points, yet Indiana's grit shifted the momentum. Jonquil Jones provided 13 points, but lost her grip on the game in the final 2 quarters. Johannes faded away, and Ionescu's 12 points and 4 assists failed to impact the outcome as expected. Indiana successfully slowed the pace to take control, which is the key takeaway here. Demonstrates that Indiana possesses multiple avenues for success. They triumph when Clark explodes offensively or when Mitchell fuels a scoring surge. Victory is also achievable when the reserves contribute meaningful minutes or the defense intensifies after the break. However, This highlights the growing scrutiny regarding the coaching staff. If this roster can dismantle New York by 20 points, despite Clark not being at her peak, what is their ultimate potential if the offense were intelligently optimized to capitalize on her constant pressure throughout the entire game? This creates frustration among the fanbase. It's not that the Fever are struggling, it's that they could be a dominant force, and many feel the only obstacle standing in their way is the hesitation occurring on their own bench. Trailing in the latter half, I was incredibly impressed by the impact of the Indiana Fever reserves. N.A. Lissa Smith provided high-quality minutes during her rotation. Michaela Onyenwere continues to show significant growth, proving valuable in her role. While she only recorded 2 points, her 5 boards and defensive tenacity made her a vital contributor. Sophie, the long-range specialist, was scorching from beyond the arc once again, hitting 3 of 4 from distance. She entered the game and produced 11 points and 4 rebounds. Ty Harris matched that output with 11 points on 50% shooting plus 4 assists. The Indiana Fever reserves were clearly superior. This group truly earned their praise. Natasha Howard, Lexi Hull, Sophie Cunningham, Michaela Onyenwere, and the rest of the crew provided the kind of spark that completely alters their postseason prospects. Their performance was highlighted by Smith's intensity, while Onyenwere excelled in rebounding and defensive stops. Sophie's 11 points on efficient shooting and Harris's double-digit scoring and playmaking were pivotal. That isn't just secondary production. That is the recipe for surviving when your marquee player goes cold. It's the difference between a routine win and a genuine statement of intent. Come playoff time, opponents will aggressively trap Clark, use physical play, and constantly deny her the ball. They will demand that her teammates step up and execute under pressure. Therefore, the fact that the bench outclassed New York's reserves stands as one of the most significant takeaways from the evening. Indiana did not rely solely on Clark's brilliance. They dominated the gritty, unglamorous aspects of the game by securing stops, boards, and floor space, while providing enough offensive variety to keep momentum on their side. Yet, this cuts both ways. If the reserves are performing this well, Clark shouldn't have to shoulder the entire load every single second. The strategy should evolve to allow her more flexibility, given that her supporting cast is clearly capable. Better help should equate to greater freedom, not increased limitations. New York's rotation was noticeably shallow, and with Sato Sabali missing, I'm not entirely sure regarding her current status. It was ultimately the Indiana Fever's defensive grit in the latter half that propelled them to victory, and played a role in sealing the deal to clinch the win. Honestly, even though I feel like Caitlin Clark was capable of another monster night, a 17-7 stat line is fine by me. It is her first back-to-back streak in quite some time. We'll certainly take the W. The Indiana Fever are now sitting at 16-10. The Fever are looking like a legitimate threat lately. This highlights a strange tension within the team's identity right now. They are playing winning basketball, holding a 16-10 record. They just blew out the Liberty by 20 points. They possess real versatility. Mitchell is on fire. Boston is effective even when the synergy isn't perfect. Cunningham adds both spacing and grit. The defense locks down when they are motivated, yet the viral narrative remains, stop hindering Caitlin Clark. That sounds hyperbolic until you consider the impossible standard Clark set. She isn't evaluated like an average second-year guard. She is held to the standard of a generational talent who alters the league's landscape and the spatial dynamics of the floor simultaneously. When she drops 45 points and 10 assists, nobody sees it as a lucky night. They view it as the expected standard. So, when the next game arrives and the tempo dips, her minutes are trimmed and the playmaking is spread elsewhere, fans feel like they just watched a team unlock a cheat code only to shove it back in the closet. The Fever don't have to force every possession through Clark in a predictable, easy-to-defend way. but they must keep her as their primary source of pressure. Opposing defenses should be terrified of her every single second. Even when she offloads the ball, they should fear it's coming back to her instantly. If Mitchell scores, it should be because Clark warped the defense. When Boston passes, it should be a reaction to the help defense Clark triggered. That isn't favoritism, that's just sound team hierarchy. Right now, performing at a high level. If we could just get Stephanie White in the front office to stop holding Caitlin Clark back, everything would be perfect. I had a gut feeling that after watching the absolute clinic Caitlin Clark put on, Stephanie White would try to revert to her preferred methods. And what she wants is this tiresome hub system. She insists on funneling everything through Alia Boston. She wants to rely on Kelsey Mitchell for everything, which is absurd. Caitlin Clark did pick up her 6th technical. Now for the core critique. Stephanie White's biggest hurdle may any case not be an irrational hatred of Clark or a deliberate attempt to sabotage the season. That's too reductive and impossible to prove from one game. The fundamental problem is philosophical. White seemingly clings to a desire for egalitarianism, hubs, shared touches, strict rotations, and a structural philosophy that refuses to revolve around one singular star. In principle, that sounds responsible. Managers love equilibrium. They crave order. They enjoy the certainty of people coping if their marquee player rests. However, Caitlin Clark is no typical star. For her, true balance cannot imply watering down the attack until the opposition feels comfortable. Equilibrium must mean leveraging her influence to generate quality opportunities for her teammates. Distributing the rock is distinct from diluting your competitive edge. This is why the Boston Hub discourse is vital. It's why Mitchell's shot selection counts. It's why benching her at the close of quarters matters. Taken alone, these choices are defensible. Combined, they reveal a trend where Indiana seems more focused on adhering to a system than empowering the catalyst who makes that system dangerous. Then there is the technical foul dilemma. Clark just reached her 6th, pushing her closer to an automatic suspension. She must stay composed, as missing a contest over technicals would handicap the squad and provide ammunition for detractors. Conversely, the Fever must acknowledge the visible irritation when a player believes physical play goes unpenalized. The tempo gets broken and the scheme doesn't fully maximize her assets. Real guidance isn't just telling a superstar to settle down. True leadership entails cultivating a climate where she doesn't feel she's battling the refs, the roster, the defense, and the strategy all at once. She is nearing an 8-foul suspension limit. She has to get a handle on this, seriously. She cannot keep picking up technicals. It's going to cost her a game. Drop your thoughts in the comments. I'm curious to hear them. So, here is where the Fever currently stand. Following one of the most bizarre yet comfortable victories, they took down New York 108-88, bringing their record to 16-10. Kelsey Mitchell scored 33 with elite precision. The reserves delivered, and the defense tightened up after half-time. Statistically, it was an impressive team performance. But the reason it blew up online is that this win posed a larger query than any defeat could. If Indiana can crush a contender by 20 while Caitlin Clark is out of sync, restricted to 26 minutes, and not even the focal point of the offense, then what exactly are they stalling for? It is a forced ultimatum. Either Stephanie White is carefully nurturing a franchise cornerstone through a rough patch, and fans should accept that. The long-term vision outweighs one stat sheet. Or they are over-managing their best asset, and every fragmented rotation denies them the chance to become a playoff juggernaut. Clark doesn't need them to prioritize her ego. She needs them to capitalize on the advantage she provides. Built. These are worlds apart. You have the star power spectacle on one side and legitimate competitive hoops on the other. That is precisely why Caitlin Clark's post-game frustration landed so heavily despite the 20-point blowout. She wasn't venting about the score, she was signaling a party hard limit. The Fever look solid today and possess some real upside. Yet, for them to evolve into the legitimate title contender, they must stop managing their primary asset as if she's just an auxiliary piece forced to manufacture. Magic in brief spurts. So, what's your perspective? Does Stephanie White's management of Caitlin Clark make sense, or is she suppressing the exact spark that could define this Indiana squad? Leave your thoughts below. Smash that like button, subscribe, and weigh in on whether this was tactical brilliance or another instance of the Fever succeeding despite their own limitations.